Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Vic.
I am excited to have you on and dive into this topic about fixing and all that good stuff with you. And appreciate you taking the time to share space with us. And as my listeners know, I like to get into things. So, how did you get into what you're doing today? What's the story? What's the background? Of how you ended up doing what you're doing today.
Well, I'm in a field that has come to be called psychospirituality. Neuroscience, psychology, and spirituality. And by spirituality, I mean a practical spirituality, living from spiritual principles as simple as, choosing to be at peace, extending love, forgiving, those kinds of active ways of living a spiritual life. Well, all three of those important domains of human experience have finally met at the same point. They're on the same page, and they're finding that they dovetail exquisitely. And that field has come to be called psycho spirituality. And I came into it the hard way. I came to this work um, uh, years ago when I experienced what I've come to call a perfect storm of stress. I lost an executive level position I had at Stanford University Medical School that, I devoted a decade or more climbing the career ladder to reach. And 9 days after that, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And, the doctors warned me that this tumor and particularly the surgery could leave me seriously disabled, potentially unable to work again. And I was married with 4 children and a mortgage. And on top of that, my marriage was in trouble because, I devoted so much time to building my career at the expense of time with my family. So, suddenly there I was. My life was coming apart at the seams, and it seemed there was nothing I could do about it. That the world had finally caught up to me and it was about to crush me. That's the way it felt. And there was nothing I could do to change the impending catastrophe. And I had to wait about 6 weeks for the surgery, and the first 2 weeks were um, just a catastrophe. I was emotionally a wreck. Every night I would wake up, like at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd stare out into the cold, dark night. It looked like some black hole, some oblivion about to suck me and my family in, terrified by what might happen to me and to them. And and then one night, about 2 weeks into this, I reached this point where I was absolutely beleaguered, and I seriously questioned which was worse. And this is another one of those 3 in the morning, dark night of the souls moments. And it was I asked myself, what was worse, the dire problems that the doctor predicted that might happen in the future, or the abject fear that was happening in me every day, all day long for the last 2 weeks? And as I was discover, the fear that had been happening to me all my life up until that point that I'd never addressed, that I'd suppressed, and the answer was clear. The fear was worse. I had to face it. And so, because the bone chilling fear that I was experiencing, it was consuming me. It was depleting the strength I knew I needed to get through what I had to get through. So for the next half hour, I used a process that I had learned from a very famous and great American psychologist, and actually had taught to other people, but never used much on myself. And it was very simple process that just simply involved being diligently aware of every fearful, painful thing I thought and how it turned into the distress I was feeling and the pessimism that it was causing me, the attitude of pessimism that it gave birth to, and to observe it all without interfering with any of it, without trying to change any of it, without trying to impose on top of it some positive affirmation, but just to be with my feelings. And my thought was is that what would happen is that it would eventually calm down. I wasn't prepared for how much it was going to swell. There was so much fear in me to fear. And it was like, uh, my grandson's a surfer, and he often describes when you catch a big wave, there's no getting off of it. Because if you jump off of it, it's going to suck you down to the deep. He said, you got to ride it in and trust you're going to reach shore. And well, that's exactly the experience I was in. This huge amount of fear came in, overwhelmed me, and it was all I could do to ride it. And I reached shore. It eventually evened out, delivered me back to myself. And I had the realization that all that fear that I was experiencing, um, the world wasn't doing to me. My situation wasn't doing to me. It was happening in me. I was generating it. That the situation I was at some level was just neutral. Things happen. Health issues happen to people. People lose their jobs all the time. Life goes up, life goes down. But the way in which I was reacting to all of it was the pain that I was in that was actually debilitating me. And so after I had that insight that this is happening in me, not in reality, and not to me, um, I managed to continue to allow myself to feel whatever was there. And the fear came back, not as strong the next time, and then it came back again, less and less, until I finally reached this point where I kind of crossed a bridge. I crossed over from the stress and the fear into a place of peace. And I knew I was at peace because when I looked out that window that that probably an hour before it looked like a black hole, it had suddenly changed. And what I was seeing was reality. We had this beautiful oak tree in the front of our house, and it was a moonlit night, and the moonlight was shimmering off of the tree leaves. And in that state of calm that I was in, I could actually feel the moment was sacred. And I could feel a feeling of optimism rise in me. Maybe I'd be okay if I could locate this way of being, this place inside of myself where all was well. And so I made up my mind right then and there that as I proceeded forward towards surgery, that I was going to let go of fear in this way. And one of the things that I had to do with my former job to get my golden parachute was to finish a project that nobody else could finish. I had to do it to earn my golden parachute. And so when I went back to work, I was surprised at how much my perspective had changed. I looked at people who I thought were my adversaries, and I thought that was just me. That was just my projection onto them. And I let it go. I was able to look at all the things that I had to do. It's a pretty major project. And I could discern for myself the things that I could get done in the time that I had and things that I couldn't get done. And I didn't worry about the things that I couldn't do, but focused on what I was doing. And, fear would come up and I would shift it in this way. Well, when the surgery turned out to be a complete success, sparing me a life of disability. And I actually got my job back. Not that job, but another job in the medical center. The chairman of the Department of Psychiatry called me and said he wanted to interview me. He'd heard about this guy who was facing this ordeal with such a positive attitude. And he said, we need a positive attitude in this godforsaken department. And I went and interviewed, and he offered me the job. And, if I had gone to a neuroscientist, and we had some of the world's best neuroscientists at Stanford at that time, and I would have asked them, do you think this shift in attitude, this shift in mindset had anything to do with the positive outcome of the medical procedure I underwent? They, at that time, this was back in the 80s, they would have said, oh, it's just hippie nonsense. Um, you just got lucky. You got a good surgeon, did a good job. Well, we now know in science, not even theoretically, it's definitively established in science, that mind-body connection has everything to do with how our bodies do, the course our health takes, the longevity we enjoy. It's all connected. And we also know about the brain that, everything in life depends on on how your brain is functioning. And we know that people who are living with from more spiritually inclined principles have great brain function. Their higher order brain function, uh, the prefrontal cortex is more active and it's actually expanding, while the lower level, more primitive parts of the brain, the limbic system, where the fear center, the amygdala is, actually begin to shrink. And so this is generating a person that is at choice, is choosing their own way in their life instead of their brain using them. And so um, I would stayed at Stanford another 5 years, and after that, I went to work at an agency that worked with an approach to overcoming catastrophic life events. We were working in the AIDS epidemic at the height of the epidemic in San Francisco. We worked with people who were life-threatening illnesses, parents who had lost children. We worked in prisons. And the Clinton administration actually sent us off to Croatia and Bosnia during that genocidal war to work with refugees who were experiencing extreme post-traumatic stress. Um, and it was one of the first places to do that infusion of spirituality with psychology and neuroscience. And in 2005, the center was awarded the Excellence in Medicine Award from the AMA. And so I eventually left the center. I took what I had learned, integrating those three fields, and went out into the corporate arena to help companies, high pressure workplaces, teach their people how to shift stress. And then after I did that for a long time, I was offered a consulting position with the DeMello Center, the DeMello Spirituality Center, to bring his approach even more and more out into the world. And from that, we created this new book of DeMello's called Stop Fixing Yourself. And that's why I'm here talking to you.
I love your story and I love the work that you're doing and everything. That's awesome. One of the things I want to ask is, like, when it comes to that fear that you had, was it, did you like have a feeling of knowing, like, is this just a feeling when it was coming on? So you just had it was like your awareness kicked in and said, oh, this is where fear comes in. I need to reset. Let me go back. Was that kind of the process in that journey of yours?
Well, it was kind of like an alcoholic who finally gets to the bottom, reach the bottom where they say, there must be another way than this way that I'm living, and all the pain it causes me, and all the pain I'm causing other people through it. It was kind of like that. It's like uncle, the fear was constant, and I was at that moment I was grabbing at straws. I knew this process that I talked about, that I walked myself through. I knew it because I'd been teaching it, but I had never applied it to myself, and so it came down to physician, heal thyself. And I went, okay, I'll give this one a try, because I really trusted this psychologist. His name was Carl Rogers. He had a huge influence on the field of psychology. And he was a man who really walked his talk. And so that's where I gravitated. And so there was a part of me that was willing to suspend everything and try something new. And I was greatly relieved to find that this approach worked.
Love that. Why do you think people always think they need to fix themselves? I mean, we see this in the spiritual realm, people who are like spiritual in a sense. But why do we always think we need to work on something, fix on something? Why do we feel like we're broken? Because I know I've gone through that in my own journey too.
Well, we're unhappy. Um, we feel a sense of limitation. Like the world's closing in on us. We're shame based. We don't think we're good enough. Those feelings. Those ways of relating to ourselves are painful. And so we go out, we come to the conclusion, I need to change myself. We're unhappy. I've worked with a lot of people, in that so-called proverbial midlife crisis, although it seems to be happening to the younger generation sooner in life. If you look at the stats, only about 4% of the population define themselves as completely happy. 4%. And the irony is that we're born happy. If you look at what science, when it studies human nature, what they study is children, and what they find is that children are naturally happy. I often invite people who are struggling with unhappiness to, when they're out in the world, to watch children, to let children be their teacher for a while, how naturally and how easily and how simply they come into happiness. And even when the world upsets their apple cart, they're very resilient. They naturally progress back to happiness pretty quickly. Um, the other irony is we're born free, but we become trapped in our own limited thinking. We're born with this beautiful human heart, this open heart that we allow stress and fear to so easily close. We're born gifted beings of immeasurable worth, but we often feel we're not good enough. And there's this, all the mystics tell us there's this divinity of joy within us and surrounding us that would make our life meaningful and beautiful and rich, but we become blocked from seeing it. It's almost as if, we are all hypnotized to see what is not there and not see what is right there, right before our eyes, inside of us. And people want to know, well, how did this happen to us? Because we end up blaming ourselves for these issues. And the truth of the matter is that society programmed all of those wonderful qualities out of us. They stamped into us the belief that happiness and self-worth are found out there in the world. And if we work long and hard, success will come to whatever degree it's going to come. And out of that, happiness and fulfillment will follow. And most all of us have followed that formula. And 10 years later, we realize that success has come, but without fulfillment. And even the success that has come, we're not even enjoying that. We don't think it was enough. That's failing at life. That's failing at living. Like Tony Robbins says, is that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure in life. So we need to wake up to what is innately true about us, to our own given nature. And waking up is the realization that, contrary to what society has ingrained in us, wired into our brains, is that nothing, but absolutely nothing of the world can make us happy. Success isn't unimportant. Of course it isn't. But success is not the same as fulfillment. That's the mistake we make. Fulfillment doesn't come from the world. Happiness doesn't come from your job title, from anything, if the amount of money you make, from the neighborhood you live in. Not the radiant happiness of a child that's constant, that makes you smile for no reason, that rides the ups and downs of life evenly. Happiness comes from within you. And the truth is, there's not a single moment in a person's life when they don't have all they need to be happy. And the only reason we're ever unhappy is because we're focusing on what we don't have rather than on what we have right here, right now. In the middle of my brain tumor, when I went through that dark night of the soul and came out the other end, one of the things that opened up in me was a great appreciation for my family, for the love of my wife, for the beauty of my children, for all the support I was getting from my friends, for the fact that that day there was money to pay the mortgage, that day there was food in the refrigerator, that day I still had health insurance that was going to pay the medical bills. There was a lot to be grateful for in the midst of all of that. And that helped sustain that fearless attitude that I knew that I needed to function from. And so this book, Stop Fixing Yourself, is all about that, that I assembled from the works of Anthony De Mello. It helps you rediscover that truth about yourself, that all of that stuff you're thinking that you need to change yourself into is already in you.
I love that. I love the whole message of all that, and it's really interesting to see too, because like you're sharing some stuff with where would you say that gratitude, like being appreciative of just what you have and knowing that you have all and that you have the love, like taking those small things, and would you say it's like the essence of gratitude helped to elevate that, and how like the sense of appreciation gave more of that in some way, shape, or form?
Put you in a whole new world. There are moments during the day where I'm kvetching about this or that isn't working out. Somebody I was reaching out to didn't email me. Um, there's so many things that we can look at and grouse about and be pessimistic about, and I'll catch them. The heart of Anthony DeMello's work is all you really need is awareness. Bring into awareness what you're feeling. Bring into awareness how you're functioning at the moment. Don't resist it. Don't suppress it. Don't try to turn it into something else. Don't interfere with it. Let it speak to you. Let it show you the thoughts you're thinking that are turning into the emotional reaction that you're having. And then from that, own it. Say, this is happening in me, not to me. This has been programmed. I'm not to blame for it, but it was programmed into me. Understand, you're not some problem to be solved. You're okay. If there's a problem, it's the way you were programmed. And then begin to count your blessings very simply. And what you experience in that moment, what I experience in those moments, is a complete sea change. I'm suddenly in a new world. I suddenly can hear the birds singing outside. I can suddenly see the beauty of the rain falling or the light shining through. I suddenly feel connected to the love that's around me and that supports me. And now I'm pointed in the right direction. Now I'm on my path. Now the problem that I have turns into a challenge that I can use my creativity to resolve. Um, you know, it's the way we were programmed that gets us into trouble. And so what we need is not to figure out how to change ourselves, but how to get deprogrammed. So what's in us already can naturally arrive. And so for DeMello, the way in which we do that is through awareness. It's a question of becoming aware of the way that you've been put together and the way you function. And as you do that, finding that inside your brain, there's this whole program stamped into you, a set of demands about how the world should be, how you should be, what you should want, that's insisting all the time that its demands be met by life, by other people, by you. And when those demands aren't met, um, your brain causes you to be upset, distresses you. Um, and in short, we've been trained to upset ourselves. For instance, when other people don't live up to the to this way that we're wired, to these expectations that have been programmed into it, it torments us with frustration and anger, bitterness, or when things don't feel like they're under our control, or our future feels uncertain in some way. The way we're wired insists that we experience anxiety, we experience tension, we fill up with worry. Then we expend this enormous amount of energy coping with these negative feelings by expending even more energy trying to rearrange the world around us so that these demands that we're wired to meet get met. And certainly sometimes they get met. That happens probably 50% of the time if you're lucky. And then in those moments, you're granted a measure of precarious peace. But it's precarious because at any moment, something's going to come along that's going to upset you and kick you into that upsetting program. Plane delay, your smartphone isn't functioning properly, your computer isn't functioning properly, like me, an email hasn't come that I'm expecting. Even something as small as a spot on your shirt or tie. And then these things, are going to are going to push you into an upset. And they all depend on the criteria society establishes. They depend on how you've been conditioned. And through awareness, you begin to understand it's become a way of life in you. It's a pathetic existence that's constantly at the mercy of things and people and outcomes as you try, to make life conform to the way you're wired so that you can enjoy really the only peace most people ever know, which is like this temporary respite from negative emotions. So what DeMello is telling us, what Carl Rogers was telling us, is you need to get deprogrammed, and the way toward getting deprogrammed is quite simple. Um, but it takes courage, and it's called awareness, because what you will discover through awareness is what you're aware of, you control. What you're unaware of will continue to control you. What you're unaware of about the way your brain was wired will mean that your brain will continue to use you. That programming will continue to use you. So again, DeMello is telling us it is enough for you to simply be watchful and aware, and through that, all that's neurotic within you will begin to drop, and you'll wake up. And he gives us 4 steps to becoming aware.
So awesome. And when it comes to the awareness of it, are you becoming more aware of like a belief system or a belief or a thought process or the programming, the conditioning, or is it just aware of like just being, why do I feel this way? Or let me just be with this for a moment. And then is that kind of the process a little bit with it?
What you're becoming aware of is how you're feeling, that you tend to suppress and repress. What you become aware of is this tendency in you to function from a place of upset. So it begins with becoming aware of negative feelings. You've got hurt feelings. You're feeling nervous and tense and stressed. Maybe you're feeling gloomy and moody. You feel shame, maybe even self-hatred. I'm not good enough. You make a mistake and you really trash yourself. You might feel that life is pointless. At the end of your weary day of running all the upsets that you've been programmed to run, you look at your life and you have this discouraged feeling of it's all pointless. It makes no sense. So the first step, get in touch with those feelings. That's the first thing. Observe the thoughts you're thinking that produce the upset that you're having, leading to that narrowing of perspective that turns into that attitude that disempowers you. And then allow yourself to step back from it as if you're watching someone else suffering like this. I often advise people back from it and watch your own suffering as if it was your best friend, because you don't tend to judge your best friend. You tend to have empathy, compassion for your best friend. And compassion is an important thing to have for yourself. So step back from it as if you're watching someone else suffering, but at the same time, allowing yourself to feel that upset. And then the second step, it takes courage to do that. Oftentimes people say, if I was really to give in to the amount of fear I have in me, it will destroy me. And I say, well, I guarantee you it won't destroy you, but you got to find that out for yourself. So it's going to take some courage, just like that. My grandson riding a big wave. It takes some courage to jump up on that board and see where it takes you. Then the second step De Mello prescribes is to acknowledge that this negative feeling, it's in me. It's not in reality. It's coming from this programming that I'm having. And that you would think that was so self-evident, but for most people, they don't get it. I certainly wasn't getting it. So it's not all, it's not happening to you either. At the end of it, you end up finding it was happening for you to help wake you up, to come home to yourself, inviting a return to love. When I look back on my brain tumor, I look back on losing my job of that calamity that I was thrust into, that I thought initially was a curse. I see it was a blessing. I wouldn't have. I was too stubborn to wake up otherwise. And fortunately, I embraced it instead of fighting it. And then the third step is don't identify with those negative feelings, and don't judge them. That's why that looking at what you're going through as if you were looking at your best friend produces the compassion that's an important part of the process. But if you are judging yourself, just make that grist for the mill, another negative feeling to look at, to embrace, to allow. Your upsets have nothing to do with your true self, with this nature I've been talking about. So De Mello, he prescribes, don't say I'm depressed. If you want to say, my experience at the moment is depression, or depression is there, that's fine. Your brain takes everything literally. So if you say I am depressed, oh my God, he's depressed. Let's move to the lower brain, put us in threat mode, and kick us into fight, flight, or freeze. So, the same with fear. Not that I'm afraid. It's fear's there. Fear's there right now. Stress is there right now. That's fine. But you can say that. But not that I'm afraid. You're defining yourself in terms of a feeling, and that's your illusion. That's your mistake. In no way does any feeling affect your essential self. It's like your essential self is the blue sky. DeMello gives this great image of, he says, if you throw black paint up into the air, as it comes down and passes in front of your eyes, for a moment it'll seem like everything's black, but eventually it splashes on the ground, and you look to the air. Air hasn't been contaminated by it at all. The blue sky is still there. So you just tell yourself there's a depression there right now, there's worry there right now, but let it be, leave it alone. It will pass. Everything passes, which is the fourth step, is that it will pass, like it did for me. I went through that, riding that surfboard, that big wave that landed at shore. That was those emotions passing. And now at that moment, I'm in a space, open space, in which I can now choose the experience I want to have. And so what I invite people to do in that open space where they arrive through this process is to relax into it, to let go to it, to silence your mind as much as possible. And what you will notice is that a feeling of contentment, a feeling of peace will begin to arise all by itself. You'll feel a kind of sensation or fluttering in your heart. That's your closed heart opening again. That's love coming on, a natural state of love. And if you hang in this state long enough, what will begin to emerge is a feeling of joy. And out of all of that will come the self-confidence. Now you're having not confidence in the way you've been programmed, not confidence in what you've got to do out there in the world, but confidence in the resources that you've now discovered that are already there. You're already happy and you didn't know it. You're already at peace and didn't know it. You're already highly creative and able to meet any challenge where nothing's impossible to you, but you didn't know it. And now through this process of awareness, you see it. You've experienced it. And once that door opens, it doesn't close again. It's not that not that life doesn't go on as usual, but now you have a new way of meeting it. And the more you practice it, usually happens within 2 weeks, you begin to understand that this process of awareness has changed you. It's, awareness released something in you that changed you all by itself. And that's grace. And that's all of what DeMello's pointing to.
I love what you shared here. I love every aspect of it. I remember a spiritual teacher when I was doing my energy medicine work, Reiki master training, and all this other stuff that I did. And they were like, I am is the most, 2 words are the most powerful words to use. And we were talking about emotions, and they're like, don't ever say that I am fearful, I'm depressed, I'm this, because that's not really you. You are pure source energy. Your pure source is like all these things. And it was shifting the mindset of saying, an experience. I'm experiencing this now. And it takes the power, the charge you have on that. And at least that's been my experience through my life where I still have to catch myself 15 years later, still have to catch myself like, oh man, I said I am this. Oh, let me change that. But it's really great to do that because you're really sharing the art of transformation, right? We can go learn something new. We can practice something. We can do all this stuff. But when you really transform, you're walking in life in a whole new realm that you don't go back. It's the caterpillar to the butterfly. The butterfly cannot go back to the caterpillar. It's not going to happen. And I think when you really get that awareness and what you just shared in those 4 steps, that's what we're looking at. That's pure transformation.
That's it. That's very well said. And all the mystics, what they underline is awareness. There's this lovely spiritual story about a man, very unhappy man, a successful man, but unhappy. There's conflict in his work, there's conflict in his family. So he goes to a master and asks the master, what do I need to do to change my life? And it was the master's day of silence. So he picked up his little chalkboard and piece of chalk and he wrote, awareness. And he held it up to the man. And the man said, awareness. Oh, okay. But what else can I do? And the master wrote on the chalkboard again, awareness, awareness. And he held it up to him. And he goes, yes, but what is awareness? And the master wrote, awareness is awareness is awareness. Well, that's what all the masters are telling us. You can't move past what you don't see. You can't heal what you're not in touch with at all. Awareness brings it to you. And the second thing that all the masters and mystics are unanimous about is that through awareness you come to the realization that all is well, even though everything's a mess. All is well. As you move through your awareness process, you begin to be more accepting of your neurosis. Your neurosis will raise its ugly head from time to time. One of the things about our brain is that when we've experienced some kind of trauma or some kind of great pleasure too, it gets stamped with a stress hormone called cortisol, and that makes it very strong. We're going to carry that for life. It's what happens to soldiers with post-traumatic stress. They have a memory of some very traumatic event that happened to them. And at that, say, for example, at that time, there was a loud sound of helicopters. So every time they're back safe in the world, but they hear a helicopter, their emotional memory plunges them back into that traumatic event. And so those things that get wired into us play out, but awareness is a way of meeting them and shifting out of them. So now, when awareness raises its ugly head, when my neurosis raises its ugly head in me, I bring it into awareness and I shift it much quicker. One day recently, I was walking down the hallway and heading for my office, and everything was going swimmingly well in my life. Wife and I are happy. My children and grandchildren are doing well. My career is going well. And yet I had this moment of dread that came over me. It was like this curtain suddenly fell in front of all of that. And so what I did is I shut the door to my office, sat in my chair, and brought it into awareness, embraced it instead of resisting it. And I began to see what it was connected to. The emotional memory of my stepfather abusing me and telling me that I was worthless, that I was no good, and that the world would eventually crush me. That was the biggest reaction I was having when I had that brain tumor, and there it still was. And so I understood it. I understood the feeling of dread and where it was coming from. And it provided some healing to it. I calmed down. I got back to a place of calm. And now when it comes up, the other morning it came up again. And when I woke up, it was meeting me like, oh no, another day in the world. And I look at it, and what used to be months of pain and struggle and a bad attitude that carried me for months and months was just a blip on the screen. I looked at it and I go, no, that's not what I'm going. That's not the road I'm going down to today. That's not going to be my path today. And I let it shift. I let it quiet down and dissolve. It's an illusion. And then welcome the beautiful sunshine streaming through the window and the excitement and wonder of a brand new day. That's what awareness did for me. Will do for anyone.
I love that end part you share, because it's all about there's this, here comes the reaction, right? And you can put your energy there and focus there, which is only going to magnify that. Or like you did, create awareness, know hey, I'm just going to let this pass. And then you shifted your focus and put your energy somewhere else and had a whole different experience from there, rather than having the low vibration experience that you're going to have on the other side.
Yes, exactly. Awareness gets you to choice. And one thing that DeMello is not saying is to renounce the material world. I often get that from people, are you telling me that I should just, sell all of my belongings and go to a cave? And DeMello's not saying that. He's saying one uses the material world, one enjoys the material world, But one does not make one's happiness and peace depend on the material world. It's like that Frank Sinatra song. One thing, the way that song defines the material world is you're riding high in April, you're shot down in May. That's the way it is. But the irony is that when you are detached from the material world through your awareness, as you pursue your goals, as you pursue success, you actually enjoy the process more than, when you believe that your self-worth and your inner peace and your happiness depend on the outcome. It's like if you succeed, great. If you fail, well, what's the learning in this failure? But in either case, your happiness and self-worth are not at stake.
I love that. Don, I could talk to you all day on this stuff. This is a topic I'm very passionate about and love so much of. How can people connect, follow, get the book, and everything that's aligned with that?
They can go to our website. We have a wonderful website that's very interactive, and that's DeMelloCenter.com. And DeMello is spelled DEMELLO, DeMelloCenter.com. You can go to Amazon and pick up some of Anthony DeMello's books. This book that I've been addressing today, Stop Fixing Yourself, is there. Also, DeMello's masterpiece called Awareness is there too. I highly recommend both of those books. The Way to Love, another wonderful masterpiece of his. It's all there, all available to you. And there's lots of videos and audio files you can listen to, all free of charge, to come in close to this way of liberating yourself, to this way of getting free of the way you've been programmed.
I love that. And for all the listeners, I'll have all the links in the show notes for you guys. Don, this was great conversation. I think this is stuff that is needed more into the world, especially nowadays, because it's just one of those things where we're so outside ourselves, so seeking outside, and the way the world cultured us and conditioned us in so many different ways, that now this is an opportunity to go take the journey back in and understand that we all are beautiful in essence of who we are. And all we need is really, because I always say, if you can get awareness, that's 50% of the problem solved right there. And everything else will just take care of itself as you just got to do a little bit of work with it. But it's
and it
one
quickly
of
moves to 100%. You're right. It starts out like half the problem is that you're suppressing what you're feeling. But as you bring those feelings into awareness and move through the process, you're in 100% of the solution.
Amen to that. And it's just so needed in this world. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. Thank you for taking time to share with our listeners and our tribe and community. And just appreciate you having you on.
And thank you for all the work you're doing, Vic.
Thank you so much.